Hi there, and welcome to Fuzzy on the Details. My name is Fuzzy, and today we're going to be focusing on the Marvel Multiverse RPG Community, spotlighting 3 of the top profile creators in the game. These 3 have already shared hundreds of builds on various platforms, and today they'll be sharing even more, their personal advice, tips, and tricks for those who want to up their character creation game. But before we get into it, I want to say that we have many wonderful creators in this community. I'm focusing on 3 that have had a big impact on me personally, but that's not to take away from everyone else's efforts. Day in and day out, folks are posting character builds, answering questions, sharing maps and adventures, and hosting regular games for newcomers. So many worthy contributions. So if you like this format, and you can think of other folks you would like to see highlighted in this way in the future, please let me know. Our 3 profile-making masters are Lee-Rummel, Billy Mickels, and Brennan O'Reagan. Each one of them has taken the time to share 3 really insightful tips for those of you out there who are looking to create your own character, or maybe create some NPCs for a game that you're narrating. So that's 9 total tips we've got to get through. Let's get started. First up is Perry. Lee-Rummel posts primarily on the Marvel Multiverse Facebook page, link in the description, and as of the time of this recording, he's got 271 builds out there. Guaranteed that number is higher by the time you see this. He averages over a dozen a week. His signature attack is lesser-known heroes and villains. I'd like to think I know my stuff when it comes to Marvel, but he's still got builds and posts where I learn a little bit about a corner of the Marvel universe I had no idea existed. Perry's trait is font of information because his knowledge of these characters goes way back, and you can trust that his builds are solidly rooted in Marvel lore. To see all of his builds, just go to the Facebook page, search by his name, and scroll until your fingers bleed. It's hard to pick just one of Perry's builds to highlight, but I want to call attention to his Hounds build. This is a great example of how his choices are just perfect for the character or concept. In this case, it's the combination of the bloodthirsty, enduring constitution, and determination traits with his flavoring of heightened senses and ESP to be their tracking. This just oozes the character concept of the Hounds. I can't wait to work these guys into an upcoming game. Here's the advice he's got to share with us. Create your character's story and powers without thinking about how it will function within the game mechanics. It's important to enjoy the story you want to create and not to try and power game. It's easy to get bogged down with what will make your character the toughest and not what will make them the most interesting or fun to play. Every ranged attacker does not need accuracy. Such good advice. You don't want your characters or their enemies to feel too samey. If your characters are predictably all maximized in a power gamey sort of way, your narrator is just going to up the threat level. And now you've got the same challenge, relatively speaking, but you're playing a boring character. Here's Perry's next quote. Don't get disappointed if the prerequisite powers do not work with your image of what the character can do. Basically, it's okay to toss away some powers and pretend they don't exist, rather than frustrate yourself over having to take illumination to get deafen. Obviously, ask your narrator for the best way to handle this if you're doing this for your own character, but I think you'll find most narrators amenable to the idea of making small rules exceptions to prioritize a strong character concept. And Perry's last quote. Don't let your character's abilities restrict what you think they can do. Even a character with a 0 agility can do backflips. They just might be harder to accomplish. Take into consideration that a character with a 1 resilience has 3 times the health of a character with a 0. It's all relative. Most players will scoff at a 1 resilience and then get mopped by your character with a melee 3 and a sword. Yeah, I have to constantly remind myself that 0 is average, Fuzzy. 0 is average. Next up is Billy Mickels. Billy is active on both Facebook and Reddit, and he's also got all of his character builds in a Google Drive. The link is in the description. He's got over 210 builds on there, and counting. When you access it, be sure to view it in grid layout for the best view. Billy's signature attack is the creativity he infuses into all of his builds. They're of course grounded in his deep understanding of Marvel lore, but he uses the rules in fun and interesting new ways. I've recently used his Rhino build, and making his horn an iconic weapon that allows him to use the ram attack without taking damage, that's just so thematic and cool, and it totally changes the way you run a combat with him. The battle just felt like it popped right out of the pages of a Spider-Man comic. And his trait is Fresh Eyes because he really showcases how flexible the system is when creating characters from the Transformers, Thundercats, or the DC franchises. Here's Billy's first quote. I call on some years of experience as a collector, but I do a respectable amount of research from different sources for each build as well. I love the old official handbooks of the Marvel Universe, Classic Marvel Forever, which has phase rip builds for guidance, writeups.org, Wikipedia, and marvel.fandom.com. They're all great resources to research history, powers, and personality, especially if you're a little fuzzy on the details of the character you're trying to build. Yes, yes, yes to all of these sources. Writeups.org is a particularly good one and sometimes will have details that other sources miss. And with so much Marvel lore out there, aren't we all a little fuzzy on the details sometimes? Here's Billy's next quote. When considering powers, I lean into what the core rulebook says about riffing powers on page 285 and unique powers on page 286. How does the power work, and can I fit it into a current available power with some flavor retweaking or wording? Do I need to adjust the focus cost up or down because of an alteration to range, duration, trigger, and/or effect? This is great advice to marry with Perry's advice on prerequisite powers. The important thing to keep in mind here, I think, is that the core rulebook strongly encourages you to not only get the narrator's buy-in when you make these types of tweaks, but other players as well, just to ensure both fairness and fun at the table. And Billy's last quote. Don't overlook extra occupation and extraordinary origin, as they can go a long way to adding additional traits that can make a bigger impact on gameplay and flavor than people may realize. Totally agree. For example, Cable isn't in the game yet, but you can bet he'll have both mutant and tech origins. This isn't just a mechanical thing, it's absolutely central to his character. And finally, we've got Brennan O'Reagan, who is active on Facebook, Reddit, and Discord, and I am thrilled to announce he's got a brand new website at www.ultimatefantasticroles.com. Go there, bookmark it, visit often. Brennan's signature attack is themed content. He's known for his character packs that all have related characters and threats of all ranks. For example, his Sentinel packs don't just have different versions of the Sentinels, but also Master Mold, Nimrod, Cameron Hodge, and even Rank 1 Friends of Humanity goons. I gave Brennan the Combat Expert trait since he's got some great packs on weapons and equipment. Here's a sneak peek of his website, where you can see those weapons and equipment packs. He's doing some really cool stuff with different types of materials and even single-use items. And here's where you can find all of his character packs. Really awesome stuff. Let's hear his first quote. On making enemy NPCs. Try to connect your NPCs into the storyline as much as possible. A lot of characters I've published are parts of factions and organizations. Having a group of antagonists that are diverse but fit a theme can really help combat come to life. Marvel Comics uses a lot of great villain organizations like The Hand, Hydra, and AIM that have a lot of tools at their disposal but all fit into certain aesthetics and niches. Fleshing out these organizations or building your own can really add spice to a combat. Yeah, this is one of the reasons I love Brennan's themed content so much. When you're statting up enemies, it would be so boring to just have a room of Hydra goons, all of which have the same stats. But if you give each different abilities, ranks, and tactics, that would make for a really fun combat where the party has to actually learn who the biggest threats are and then decide what order to tackle them in. Here's Brennan's second quote. On making your own character at a specific rank, or recreating a character from the comics, the most important thing rank determines is how many powers you can have. Therefore, when determining what rank you want a character to be, you should decide based on the powers they need to realize your concept. I find this to be a more important metric than worrying about, is my character stronger than Wolverine but weaker than Thor? Start with the powers you think are core to the concept. Absolutely. I mean, sometimes it's hard not to compare, but keep in mind that rank doesn't always have to equal raw power. For example, if you chose to raise Nightcrawler to rank 4, you don't have to give him the absolute most optimized powers ever. You can focus more on flexibility, like giving him some new martial weapon powers that allow him to use his swords in combat. Sure, ranking Nightcrawler up to 4 makes him hit harder and gives him more karma and better stats, but to me, that's not the reason to do it. It's to make sure you've got all of his abilities covered so it feels like you're playing Nightcrawler at the table. And finally, Brennan's last quote, "On player characters, an unrecognized strength of this system is what I call Jekyll and Hyde characters. Characters with an inner conflict, torn between a monstrous side and a noble one, can be a lot of fun to play. Many iconic Marvel characters like the Hulk, Morbius, and Venom are examples of this. Traits and tags give you a lot of ways to explore this space. Bloodthirsty, berserker, abrasive, extreme appearance, and more can be used not only as flavor, but to have an effect on all aspects of gameplay. I've had a few players use these types of characters, and every time they've told me it was a rewarding experience. I can say personally, I don't use these traits as often as I should, and honestly, I sometimes forget to use abilities like Berserker if I'm running an NPC with them. Solid advice. Well, that's all the advice we've got for you today from these character build masters, but it's by no means an exhaustive list, so please share your own advice in the comments. And remember, if you haven't checked out the Marvel Multiverse Facebook, Discord, or Reddit, I encourage you to give one or all of them a look. There's so much helpful information and advice in there that's shared every single day. And finally, what do you think of this kind of video? Any ideas for similar community spotlights in the future? Whether it's a deserving creator or maybe a topic you'd like to see explored. Let me know in the comments. And of course, thank you guys so much for listening and all of your support. Have a fantastic day.